Have you ever felt like the harder you try, the worse things get? It's a frustrating experience that many of us have faced. You put in more effort, more time, more energy, but instead of improving, your performance seems to decline. This puzzling phenomenon is what we call the paradox of effort. It's a concept that challenges our common belief that trying harder always leads to better results. In this video, we'll explore why sometimes pushing ourselves too hard can actually lead to failure and what we can do about it. Let's start by looking at what we call the pressure cooker effect. When we increase the pressure on ourselves, it doesn't always lead to better outcomes. In fact, it can often have the opposite effect. Think about times when you've been under intense pressure to perform. Maybe it was during an important presentation, a crucial exam, or a high-stakes competition. Did you find that the pressure made you perform better, or did it cause you to stumble and make mistakes you normally wouldn't? The pressure cooker effect occurs because our brains and bodies have a complex relationship with stress. A certain amount of stress can be motivating and can sharpen our focus. But when that stress crosses a threshold, it starts to work against us. Our thoughts become scattered, our bodies tense up, and we lose the fluidity and ease that often characterizes our best performances. This leads us to an important question. What's happening in our brains when we try too hard? The science behind overthinking gives us some valuable insights. When we put too much conscious effort into a task, we activate parts of our brain that can interfere with smooth, automatic performance. It's like trying to micromanage a process that usually runs best on autopilot. Think about activities you do well without much conscious thought, like walking or typing on a keyboard. Now imagine if you tried to control every aspect of these actions consciously. You'd likely find yourself stumbling or making typos. This is because overthinking can disrupt the neural pathways that allow us to perform skills we've already mastered. Moreover, when we overthink, we often focus on potential negative outcomes. This negative focus can increase our anxiety and further impair our performance. It's a cycle that can be hard to break once it starts. To understand this phenomenon better, we need to look at a principle in psychology called the Yerkes-Dodson law. This law describes the relationship between arousal, which we can think of as stress or pressure, and performance. It suggests that there's an optimal level of arousal for any given task. Too little arousal, and we're not motivated enough to perform well. Too much arousal and our performance suffers due to stress and anxiety. The interesting thing about the Yerkes-Dodson law is that the optimal level of arousal varies depending on the task. For simple, straightforward tasks, we can handle and even benefit from higher levels of arousal. But for complex tasks that require careful thought and coordination, the optimal level of arousal is much lower. This brings us to an important realization. Sometimes, less really is more. There are many scenarios where reducing our effort can lead to better outcomes. This doesn't mean not trying at all, but rather finding a balance where we're engaged without being overly tense or anxious. For example, in sports, athletes often perform best when they're in the zone, a state where they're focused but relaxed, letting their training take over without overthinking each move. In creative pursuits, some of our best ideas come when we're not actively trying to force them, but when we allow our minds to wander and make unexpected connections. The power of letting go and trusting the process is significant. It's about having confidence in your abilities and the work you've already put in, rather than constantly second-guessing yourself or trying to control every detail. However, letting go can be challenging, especially in a society that often equates effort with virtue and success. This brings us to the role of expectations in the paradox of effort. High expectations, whether they come from ourselves or others, can create unnecessary pressure that hinders our performance. When we set extremely high expectations for ourselves, we're more likely to experience anxiety about meeting those expectations. This anxiety can lead to the very overthinking and over effort that we're trying to avoid. Similarly, when we feel that others have high expectations of us, we may feel a need to prove ourselves, leading to tension and forced effort rather than natural, flowing performance. It's important to recognize that these expectations, while often well intentioned, can be counterproductive. They can cause us to focus too much on the outcome rather than the process, leading to a tense, rigid approach that stifles our natural abilities. So, how do we find the right balance between effort and relaxation? It's a skill that takes practice, but there are techniques that can help. One approach is to focus on the process rather than the outcome. When we're fully engaged in the steps of what we're doing, rather than worrying about the end result, we're more likely to find that sweet spot of focused yet relaxed effort. Another technique is to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness involves being fully present in the moment, aware of your thoughts and feelings without judgment. This can help you recognize when you're starting to overthink or try too hard, allowing you to consciously relax and refocus. It's also crucial to recognize the importance of rest and recovery in achieving our goals. Our culture often glorifies constant hustle and grind, but this approach can lead to burnout and decreased performance over time. Regular periods of rest and relaxation are essential for recharging our mental and physical energy, allowing us to approach our tasks with renewed focus and clarity. This brings us to an important point. We may need to redefine our notion of success. Traditional definitions of success often focus on external achievements and constant improvement. But what if we expanded our definition to include personal growth, well-being, and the ability to perform with ease and enjoyment? By shifting our focus from always trying to do more or be better to appreciating our current abilities and enjoying the process of growth, we can reduce the self-imposed pressure that often leads to over-effort and underperformance. This doesn't mean giving up on improvement or setting goals, but rather approaching them with a more balanced, sustainable mindset. Now, let's look at some practical tips for easing up and avoiding the pitfalls of trying too hard. One effective strategy is to set realistic, incremental goals rather than focusing solely on big, daunting objectives. By breaking larger goals into smaller, manageable steps, we can reduce overwhelm and maintain a steadier, more sustainable level of effort. Another helpful technique is to practice self-compassion. Often, we're our own harshest critics, pushing ourselves harder than anyone else would. By treating ourselves with kindness and understanding, especially when things don't go as planned, we can reduce the pressure we put on ourselves and create a more supportive internal environment for growth and performance. Regular practice of relaxation techniques can also be beneficial. This might include deep breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, or meditation. These practices can help us become more aware of tension in our bodies and minds, and give us tools to release that tension when it's not serving us. It's also helpful to cultivate a growth mindset. This means viewing challenges and setbacks as opportunities for learning and improvement, rather than as threats or failures. With a growth mindset, we're more likely to approach tasks with curiosity and openness, rather than tension and fear of failure. One of the most effective states for balancing effort and ease is what psychologists call flow. Flow states are those magical moments when we're fully immersed in what we're doing, losing track of time and self-consciousness. In flow, effort feels effortless, and we often perform at our best without feeling like we're trying hard at all. Flow states occur when we're engaged in a task that's challenging enough to hold our full attention, but not so difficult that it overwhelms us. It's a state of optimal balance between our skills and the challenge at hand. While we can't force ourselves into flow, we can create conditions that make it more likely to occur. To cultivate flow in daily life, try to engage in activities that you find intrinsically rewarding, things you enjoy for their own sake, not just for external rewards. Set clear goals for your tasks, but once you've set those goals, try to focus on the process rather than constantly evaluating your progress. Create an environment that minimizes distractions and allows you to fully focus on what you're doing. It's also helpful to pay attention to when you naturally experience flow in your life. What kinds of activities tend to absorb you completely? What conditions seem to support these experiences? By recognizing these patterns, you can try to recreate similar conditions in other areas of your life. Interestingly, we can learn a lot about balancing effort and achievement by observing nature. In the natural world, we see countless examples of significant accomplishments achieved without apparent strain or struggle. A tree doesn't strain to grow, it simply grows, following its nature and responding to its environment. Water doesn't try to flow downhill, it simply follows the path of least resistance. This doesn't mean that growth and change in nature are effortless in the sense of requiring no energy. Rather, it suggests a kind of effortless effort, action that aligns with the natural flow of things rather than struggling against it. We can apply this principle in our own lives by trying to align our efforts with our natural strengths, interests, and the demands of our environment, rather than constantly fighting against our nature or circumstances. Observing nature can also teach us about the importance of cycles of effort and rest. Just as the natural world has seasons of growth and dormancy, we too need periods of intense activity balanced with times of rest and renewal. By honoring these natural cycles in our own lives, we can maintain a more sustainable and effective approach to our goals. As we wrap up, let's recap the main points about the paradox of effort. We've seen that trying harder doesn't always lead to better results, and can sometimes even cause our performance to decline. This happens due to the pressure cooker effect, where increased stress leads to tension and overthinking that interfere with our natural abilities. We've explored the science behind overthinking and the Yerkes-Dodson law, which shows us that there's an optimal level of arousal for performance, and that this level varies depending on the task at hand. We've also discussed the importance of balancing effort with relaxation, and how letting go and trusting the process can often lead to better outcomes than forced effort. We've looked at the role of expectations in creating unnecessary pressure, and how redefining our notions of success can help us approach our goals with a more balanced mindset. We've explored practical strategies for easing up, including setting realistic goals, practicing self-compassion, and using relaxation techniques. We've also delved into the power of flow states, where effort feels effortless, and we often perform at our best. And we've seen how observing nature can teach us valuable lessons about balanced, aligned effort. The key takeaway is that effective performance isn't about constantly pushing harder, but about finding the right balance of engagement and ease. It's about working smart rather than just working hard, and about aligning our efforts with our natural strengths and the flow of our environment. This doesn't mean we should never push ourselves or that all effort is bad. Growth and achievement often require sustained effort and pushing beyond our comfort zones. But it does mean being mindful of how we apply that effort, and being willing to ease up when pushing harder is counterproductive. As you move forward from this video, I encourage you to experiment with a more balanced approach in your own life. Pay attention to those times when effort feels forced and those times when it flows naturally. Try easing up in areas where you've been pushing too hard and see what happens. You might be surprised to find that by trying less hard, you actually achieve more. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate effort, but to find a way of engaging with our tasks and goals that feels more natural, sustainable, and ultimately more effective. It's about working with ourselves rather than against ourselves and finding a path that allows us to grow and achieve without unnecessary struggle. By understanding and applying the principles we've discussed in this video, you can navigate the paradox of effort more skillfully. You can learn to recognize when pushing harder is helping you and when it's holding you back. And you can develop a more balanced, intuitive approach to your goals that allows you to perform at your best without burning yourself out. So the next time you find yourself stuck or struggling, remember, sometimes the key to moving forward isn't to push harder, but to ease up and let your natural abilities shine through. Trust in your capabilities, stay present in the process, and allow yourself to find that sweet spot of engaged yet relaxed effort. In doing so, you may discover a more enjoyable and effective path to your goals.